Welcome to the next episode of Brandland. I'm Garrett Justice, and today I'm joined by Geoff Atkinson, who's the founder and CEO of Huckabuy. Geoff, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Garrett. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
No, I'm doing great. It's so great to have you here today. So Huckabuy is SEO software. You guys are based in Park City. Is that right?
That's correct.
Beautiful Park City. I think everyone hears Park City this time of year and gets excited for, hopefully some of those resorts opening up and some snow coming there.
Yeah, it looks like next week a lot of them will start opening up for Thanksgiving. So it's an exciting time of year here.
I love it. I can't wait. Well, hey, Geoff, appreciate you joining our show today. And, before we dive into the meat of this, why don't you give our listeners, that brief overview of your career and what Huckabuy does?
Sure. So I actually moved to Utah. I'm from the East Coast. I moved to Utah after college in 2005, started at Overstock, and eventually became their SVP over marketing and analytics. So a lot of e-commerce, digital marketing background. SEO was just a huge win for us there. We went from a channel of 0 to like a channel of 300 million in a very short amount of time. So learned a lot about what it takes to have that type of growth, also what it takes to build a brand. Overstock's an incredible brand, and we spent a lot of time and money on building that brand. But now doing my own thing and founded Huckabuy, which is, think of us as sort of checking a lot of the big technical SEO boxes through a SaaS company. Technical
Cool.
SEO is a hard thing to do internally, but very important. And so it kind of lends itself to being a software solution. So yeah, been doing this for about 5 years.
Love it. And typically we're kind of picky with who we have on the show. We typically don't have the CEOs, but with your deep marketing background on here today, Geoff, we're super excited to have you and just kind of pick that marketing side of your brain, especially now that you have that perspective as the CEO. So this topic is, you kind of introduced it, as you kind of gave that background. It's one that I don't think that we would normally talk about under the umbrella of brand building, right? So this show is all about how to build stronger brands, but you kind of mentioned this idea of SEO and especially technical SEO. And so today, as you and I talked about, what should we talk about today? You kind of pitched this idea of brand and technical SEO and how site performance, based on technical SEO can help or hurt your brand. So I'm intrigued and I want to kind of talk about this, but I guess before we do, I know that, part of our audience will be savvy digital marketers who are going to understand the ins and outs of technical SEO. Part of our audience is going to be more creative marketers who kind of have a high level overview, but maybe not as in depth of knowledge. So why don't you set the stage for us and tell us, for those of us who aren't as familiar, what do you mean when you say technical SEO? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, websites are designed for humans, and we spend a lot of time and money on the UI, UX of a human being. But I argue that actually the most important visitor in any given day is this Google bot. And their UI UX is not nearly often as dialed as a human's. And so their experience, the Google bot's sort of UI UX, is really technical SEO. So stuff like, how fast is the page speed so that the bot's not waiting around to crawl the site? Does the site include something called structured data, which is sort of the language that Google prefers to talk to a website with? Is that in place? Does the site have a lot of JavaScript that's hindering the bot from being able to crawl? So those are sort of the things that cover technical SEO. And before your audience's eyes glaze over and leave because they're creative and we just don't think a lot about SEO as a brand builder. And that's what I'd love to chat about some today, because huge brands have been built based on SEO and the impressions that it gives, and the trust that comes with a #1 organic search ranking is almost unparalleled in terms of generating brand building. And it's something that doesn't come top of mind when you think of branding, but from my experience at Overstock and watching brands like eBay and Amazon be built, a lot of the credit is actually due to really good organic search.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right, especially, in our increasingly digital world where everyone's working remote, doesn't matter what industry you're in pretty much, that, we all know that, Google search is what drives so much of purchase decisions, whether it's you're a B2C company, a B2B company, a nonprofit, it doesn't really matter what it is. It's important for you to have that really well-designed, consistent digital experience driven by your website, right? And so it makes sense that, technical SEO, well, I like that you said, well, websites are built for people, right? You also have to consider how this Google bot is going to crawl this website because that's going to have big impacts on how you rank, how you show up, and getting visibility and trust and awareness and everything else that will help influence, those customers once they get on your site. Is that right?
Yeah. And if you just think about behavior too, of people that are searching, like say you're interested in buying a high end piece of software or any sort of quote unquote, like considered purchase. If the company that you're considering doesn't rank for the keywords that are relevant to that product, questions go up into your mind, like, who is this company? The trust and natural association of trust with an organic search ranking that's really high up, ideally number one, for a human it's there, right? We don't naturally trust the paid ads, but if we see a number one ranking and a brand behind that, we give that link the sense that it is authoritative, that Google's done their research, they know the best company, the company's been around for a certain amount of time, people link to it, it's a trusted brand. If it doesn't show up, we actually find that there's a lot of questions that come with that. So if you're seriously considering a expensive purchase, you're probably going to search quite a bit. And if the brand that you're thinking of buying from doesn't show up, all of a sudden you don't really trust them like you used to. If they do show up though, it just sort of supports your thought that this is the trusted brand, that this is the right decision that you're making. And so we just, especially at Overstock, we spent a lot of time on SEO and realizing how it affected brand. And if you don't mind, maybe I could tell a quick story on.
Yeah, I'd love it.
When I got to Overstock, we were considered sort of electronics, DVDs, jewelry and watches type company. We also, when we started to do SEO, we realized that at that time, and I'm going to sound old here, but it was like 2007, there weren't a lot of companies competing around furniture and bedding and this whole home and garden category. They were all big box retailers like Macy's that really weren't selling a lot online. So we built a supply chain, and more importantly, we built our website to really feature our home and garden products and started ranking. And now, if you think of Overstock, the brand is a home and garden primarily company. And that was not done through TV or your typical branding. It was hundreds of millions of impressions when people searched for sheets or a bed or patio furniture. Overstock kept coming up, and that positive association, and then as a result, users shopping, Overstock's brand shifted from this electronics, jewelry and watches type company to a home and garden company. And that was purely done through SEO, which is kind of a cool example of how SEO can really power how we consider a brand.
Yeah, I love that example. And so if I were to summarize kind of in my own words what I'm hearing you say there, if we're not thinking about SEO and especially technical SEO that helps our sites rank better together with brand building, if we're not thinking about those together, what we're missing out on is that impact that SEO can have on brand building, in that it can help raise awareness through additional impressions and rankings and as people are searching for solutions. And number two, help build trust because you're there, you're present, you're showing up, you're ranking well. And is that how you'd summarize it? Is there anything else that I'm missing from that?
Yeah, we sort of refer to brand building almost as Chinese water torture, which is kind of funny, but it's constant, right? It's as many impressions and being present constantly, even if it's almost subconsciously, just seeing a brand over and over and over and over again. And SEO, because of the amount of time we spend on Google when we're making these decisions, if you're not present all the time, your brand, even if you're doing a bunch of ads, it's going to not grow nearly as quickly. So it's important to be cross-channel, whether it's, email, display, some page search, SEO, all the channels are important. But SEO is one that we don't think about a lot when it comes to brand awareness. And it happens to be, in my opinion, maybe the most important channel for brand building.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. So this has been super helpful and insightful for me as we've talked about, that brand building and SEO and how that plays in. Another thing that is often comes up, a huge part of brand building, right, is the customer's experience. Is it a delightful, consistent experience, especially across your website? So talk to me a little bit more about how SEO and especially technical SEO can influence someone's experience once they get on your website.
Yeah, there's this sort of misconception in marketing that UI UX comes at the detriment of SEO or vice versa. That if you build a site for a Google bot, it's not going to have the bells and whistles that a user would want. I have a lot of experience in this realm, having run analytics as well at Overstock. Conversion rates always improve with good SEO. So here's an example. When you're laying out categories or navigation in any kind of site, if you call things what people search for, as opposed to what you call things internally or what you'd like to call things, it's better for SEO. And it's better for a user because you're giving them the options that they're familiar with. And so I've found every single site that's well built for SEO always has a great conversion rate. Once you start to think that you know what to call things, or you get off the track of SEO, conversion rates actually drop. So I totally agree that a great brand experience is one that's consistent, that's very positive. And people think that SEO and a user experience are at odds. My experience based on data is that they're not. They're the same. A well-designed site for SEO is also a well-designed site for users. And time again, conversion rates and people's positive experiences are at sites that are good for SEO. Page speed is a great example on the technical side. Page speed is very important in rankings, but it's also extremely important for just a good user experience. Conversion rates are directly correlated with page speed. Bounce rates are directly correlated with page speed. No one wants to be on their mobile phone and cruising a slow site. So that's just an example of specifically technical SEO, where it can impact the user experience in a positive way.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I want to ask one follow-up question to something you mentioned. Like I like your example of, kind of the page navigation and using the terms that people are actually searching for. You'll rank better and people will be more familiar with it and you'll convert better on the page. I guess to the flip side of that is I could see, especially designers, creative marketers out there saying, yeah, but that's just going to water down our brand. We're just going to be just like everyone else. How do we stand out? How do we provide a unique branded experience across our website? So, if someone on your team were to come ask you that as that marketing leader or CEO, what would your response be?
So we all fall victim of this, right? Thinking that our creative names for products are better than what people actually search for and call them. Myself personally, have fell victim of this at Huckabuy by naming products like Huck News and this and that. And it just is, it's really doesn't work. Usually very big brands, if you look at their navigation, are what people search for. The brand is known in and of itself and carries its own weight. All the products don't need to be named little, clever little nicknames. So yeah, it's, that's sort of, I would say I constantly, and I consider myself the CMO of Huckabuy, I constantly am reminding our team that, yeah, let's not be that creative. Let's just call it what people search for, and we'll be a lot better off as a
Yeah.
result.
I guess another way to say that is, you can still be unique and build personality, but there's some ways in which that's doesn't help you, it hurts you. And that might be one of them, right? So focus on those other channels or mediums that you can differentiate and you can be more creative. But in this case, it's only going to hurt you because it's going to hurt rankings, it's going to hurt that user experience on your site. Is that right?
Yeah, there's plenty of ways to be creative. I would start with design, right? There's so many opportunities. Great design is hugely impactful on a great brand, and every great brand typically has great design. No reason to get clever just with what you call things. Software companies, for some reason, are the biggest offenders of this. No e-commerce site makes up names for every single category, but software companies are infamous of having non-descriptive navigation and product names that end up, Google comes in and can't make heads or tails of what they even sell.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Cool. So we talked about, SEO impact on building your brand awareness and trust. We talked about, the impact on that customer experience once, someone gets to your site with conversion rates and everything else. Actually following up with that customer experience, there's a change coming to the Google algorithm this next year that will actually introduce new metrics that will either reward or penalize sites for their user experience. Is that right? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, this is a big one. Everybody's fearful of algorithm updates, but I always say, in an algorithm update, there's winners and there's losers. You only hear about the losers, but there's always the same amount of winners. And we want to be on the winning end. And this is a big one. Google's never talked about an algorithm update 12 months in advance. This one's called the Google Page Experience Update. It's coming in May 2021. So you have time to prepare. Page speed is a factor today in their algorithm. They use something called the Google Lighthouse score that gets data from Chrome browsers that help, dictates, especially when it comes to mobile rankings. But this is a doubling down on that. So this is all about the user experience. Specifically, what they can measure is page speed, two metrics around page speed. And the third metric is sort of shady design tactics that, when you go to hit next page or something, an ad pops up, but, good brands don't even come close to that one. So it'll be fine. So it's really just two metrics that are outside of that design piece. And they're both page speed. And so, yeah, Huckabuy has actually built a page speed product specifically for the 2021 Google Page Experience Update algorithm change and to score well for those. So our customers are prepped, and we hope are going to, and quite certain are going to be on the winning end of when that happens. But now's the time to prepare, no matter what you do. But come May 2021, you can count on there's going to be a lot of sites freaking out and having a really hard time because traffic all of a sudden has just fallen off a cliff.
Yeah, that's super important, for all of us to be thinking about and considering. So you kind of mentioned page speed, but what would you recommend for marketers out there who are listening? What should they go do right now in order to help prepare and know that they're going to be on that winning end, come when that new algorithm update rolls out?
Yeah, on huckabuy.com, we have a whole section of the website about this, one page in particular that's all about very descriptive what's going to happen. Google's been very upfront and honest with what they're looking for. You can search Google Page Experience Update and find lots of resources out there that are very valuable. So you just start with education, right? You start with learning about it. And then you can kind of put a game plan together. But the first step, especially here in November, is to learn about it, because it's going to be, it's probably the biggest update they'll have done in 10 years, and you just want to be prepped for it.
Awesome. Well, I think that's an awesome resource that you have too. We'll make sure to drop the link to that page on your site where this podcast is hosted, so everyone can find that pretty easily. But Geoff, this has been such a great conversation. I really appreciate it. I think it's been a unique one because again, we don't typically think about SEO, especially technical SEO, together with brand building. But obviously, it's important, and obviously, there's a big impact there, and we should be. So, thank you for helping us kind of change our thinking around that today. As we wrap up here, if there are listeners who have questions for you or want to follow up or keep in touch, what's the best way for them to do that?
So the best way to get in touch with Huckabuy is just on our site, right? We take care of podcast listeners. They always get a discount, and I usually join a lot of the conversations. If you want to get in touch with me directly, LinkedIn is probably the easiest. And it's Geoff with a G, Geoff, so pretty easy to remember. Atkinson, you can find me there on LinkedIn quite easily, and just direct message me, and I'm on there quite often. So.
Awesome. Well, Geoff, thanks again so much for being on the show today and for sharing your knowledge. Hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Garrett. It's my pleasure.